Wow, last night was probably one of the more unpredictable draft nights I have ever seen in my entire life. Now, of course, we all expected Victor going #1 to happen, but after that, it was really just a whirlwind. We saw teams like Charlotte take Brandon Miller at 2, a pick in which left many fans disappointed. We saw Detroit hop on Asar instead of taking Cam Whitmore like a lot of people projected. And we saw a player like Gigi Jackson, who at one point was projected to go top 10, top 15 in the draft, fall all the way to the second round. I mean, this draft from top to bottom was filled with nothing but surprises, ooh and ah moments, and there were a lot of steals in the back half of the draft that a lot of people might not notice. One being Jordan Walsh going to the Celtics, another one being Maxwell Lewis going to the Lakers. But we're gonna get to that later on in the video. But the main thing that I would like to focus on right now is the fact that Charlotte did, which is something that was surprising to me, in taking Brandon Miller with the second pick. Now, when I say this pick is surprising to me, it is truly because I felt like Charlotte would take a player who I thought was the second best player in the draft in Scoot Henderson. Despite some of the questions some people had about fit and how they mesh on the court, I thought Charlotte was just going to be like, we're going to draft the best player available and just move on from there. But I guess in the general scheme of things, it wasn't that surprising. I mean, a lot of mock drafts and a lot of big boards had Brandon Miller being drafted second and as the second best player in the entire draft. Can't lie, this pick was a little underwhelming to me. Now, I love Miller and I think he'll be able to contribute at a high level in the NBA one day, but taking him over Scoot, who is not only younger but also the better player, is inexcusable in my opinion. A backcourt of Melo and Scoot would terrorize the NBA for years. They wouldn't have been too many weaknesses back there and they would have played off each other really well. But with that being said, I understand the Miller pick, and that's the reason why I'm not really that upset at the pick, because I understand the fit. Now in my eyes, I think Melo and Scoot would have meshed really well, but I could understand the viewpoint of Miller's a 6'9 wing, Melo's a point guard. We really don't want to crowd up our backcourt right now, but let's take the 6'9 wing who complements him well off the ball. Because one thing we know about Brandon, he can shoot, and we know one thing about Melo, he's a distributor and he needs players around him who can shoot. And Miller's going to play really well off Melo, and he complements a lot of strengths Melo has on the offensive side of the ball. But taking him over Scoot will always be head scratching in my opinion, and that's why I am ecstatic that the Trailblazers took Scoot with the third pick. And I do think choosing Brandon Miller over Scoot will look very interesting in the future, but only time will tell. Another big surprise to me was Asar being drafted to Detroit. Now with that pick, most people saw this as a place where Cam Whitmore would go, but Detroit felt like Asar was the right pick there, and I cannot blame him. Asar is a great player and will be wonderful for this Detroit roster. I think this situation is good for him for a multitude of reasons. The first one being that he doesn't have that much pressure on him on the offensive side of the ball, and he should be on track to be a solid secondary playmaker next to Cade. Only thing that concerns me is how good of a shooter he'll develop into, because Cade is going to have the ball in his hands most of the time. And although Asar is great as a cutter off ball and moving off ball, he'll have to establish himself as a threat on the perimeter as well to even unlock that other part of his offense. But one big positive I like about this pick is what he could give them on defense on the perimeter. Now, Cade and Ivy aren't the best options on the defensive side of the ball, but Asar should be able to alleviate a lot of the problems they can have against some of the better guards and wings in the league, as Asar, in my opinion, was one of the best defenders in this entire draft class, and I think he'll develop into being one of the best perimeter defenders in the NBA. Another notable draft day decision is Anthony Black going to Orlando at 6, and this was probably the most surprising pick in the entire lottery. And when this pick was announced, a lot of people scratched their heads, and I can't blame them for it. The Orlando Magic do already have enough guards in that backcourt, and they aren't the best shooting team in the league. Plus, they have enough creators as is, so why draft another creator who can't shoot? But the reason why I'm not as low on the pick as others are is, for one, I think Jalen Suggs is on his way out, and I think that explains the Black pick and also why they took Jet Howard at 11. Secondly, I like Ant as a prospect, and I think if he was put into a situation where he's surrounded by talent, he'll develop really nicely. And Orlando is one of the most talented teams in the league, so I think it's a great fit for him. Also, I think with the selection of Jet at 11, I think Orlando did pretty well with their selections. They addressed size and shooting, and they got them another creator other than Paolo. Now, in terms of some of my favorite picks in the draft, number one is probably Jairus to Indy. Jairus is a winning player, and Indiana is building a winning culture over there. Let's not forget that Indiana was pretty competitive before Tyrese went out with that injury. And Jairus and Miles Turner will be a terror on the defensive side of the ball, and offensively he's going to thrive off of Tyrese. He can do whatever you ask him to do on the court. Another one of my favorite picks was Washington taking, in my opinion, probably one of the most underrated players in the draft in Bilal. Now, my video I dropped yesterday, I talked about the big changes that are coming in Washington, and we saw another huge decision being made in the beginning of this rebuild as they took Bilal with the 7th pick. And me personally, I'm a huge fan of this. Bilal is a guy who at this point had the highest upside as a player. The two-way potential is so intriguing, and I don't think Washington could have made a better selection. Plus, I love the idea of Poole and Bilal in the backcourt. Now, Bilal is pretty raw, because let's not forget, he didn't start out the season playing for Metropolitan. He was playing with one of their under development teams. So that's why I expect Bilal to have some rough spots and some rough moments, especially early on in his career. He's definitely going to have some growing pains, but with Jordan Poole there to alleviate some of the pressure off of him, and that way he doesn't have enough pressure on him to be who he is so quick, I think he'll develop really nicely. And like I said, that upside is very intriguing. Now, if we're talking about the biggest surprise in the draft, I mean, it's nothing other than Cam Whitmore falling all the way to 20. Now, Cam Whitmore was a prospect who was at the start of the season projected to be a top 5 pick, and as the season went on, he was still projected to be top 10. And honestly, going into the draft, we all felt that same way. I know I did. Cam Whitmore was one of my favorite prospects in the draft, and his upside was out of this world. But a little bit before the draft, we heard some rumors, we heard some whispers that Cam Whitmore didn't interview really well and that there were some medical concerns. Now, we haven't seen any of the medical paperwork or documents to see where the hesitancy came for with Cam, but obviously it was something that was big enough that teams just decided to pass on him, except for the Houston Rockets at 20. Now, in terms of the team he got drafted to, him on the Rockets is one of the best things that could have happened to him. Him, Amen, Jalen, Jabari, and Alperen will be must-see TV this season. And on top of that, he won't really have that much pressure to do anything out of his way or out of his role. And that is very big for him, seeing that he's a young player and he's just now starting in this league. And I think he's going to come into the season with a chip on his shoulder. You know, all of these teams passed on me, so now I really have to prove myself to them and show them that I should have been selected minimum in the lottery. Now, those are some of the bigger storylines in the draft, but there are some quick hits that some people might have missed I would like to address. One of them being Derek Lively going to Dallas. This was a phenomenal pick for Dallas and for Derek Lively, as literally everything that Dallas needs, Lively provides. Rim protection, Lively has it. Rim running, Lively has it. He will give them everything that they need. Because as we saw this season, Dallas desperately missed a interior presence. Christian Wood wasn't that, Dwight Powell wasn't that, and Bertans wasn't that either. So with that 10th pick that Dallas had, they ended up making a trade with OKC. They attached David Bertans to it, and they traded all the way down to the 12th pick. And at the 12th pick, they got the same guy that they're more than likely was going to be picking at 10, and I think that is a masterclass for that Dallas front office. I think Lively will see some big minutes for Dallas early on, although he might not be starting. Another one is Colby Jones in Sacramento. He's one of those guys like Bruce Brown and Josh Hart where he has an amazing feel for the game and should project to be a huge guy in the league. Another one being Nick Smith going to Charlotte. Now, I don't know how I feel about this pick because I love Nick Smith as a prospect, but that Charlotte backcourt is very crowded. You have him, Bryce McGowan, LaMelo, Terry Rozier, James Bouknight. Like, there's definitely some moves that have to be made in that front court to allow Nick Smith to reach his full potential, which I think if he reaches even close to what his ceiling is, this is a steal. Now, another head-scratching pick that I personally had was Toronto drafting Grady. I mean, Personally, I think Grady should have been taken earlier in the draft by Orlando, but Toronto drafting Grady really just doesn't really sit right with me. But Grady's going to be a great player, and I think he should be very nice and contribute at a high level in Toronto. He was one of the safer prospects in this entire draft, and I think he'll be good wherever he goes. Now, another big steal like Kobe Jones to Sacramento was Maxwell Lewis going to the Lakers. Maxwell Lewis is a guy who, in my opinion, has star upside, and he started to gain some traction throughout the season, but he fell all the way to the second round, and they allowed the Lakers to get him. And I think that this is an amazing pick for the Lakers front office, and he will make everybody regret passing up on him. But that's all I have for right now. Let me know who you guys think was the most surprising pick in the draft. Let me know your favorite pick in the draft. Let me know your least favorite pick all in the comments. If you like this video and you like basketball content in general, make sure you subscribe to the channel and like the video. But that's all I have for now. Until next time, peace.